Someone had asked me to make a video showing how to launch a North American fighter kite. Launching a kite can be challenging, especially for someone relatively new to flying fighter kites. So I thought, well, okay, I'll do it. And so this is the beginning of that video. It's going to be probably at least 2 videos, and hopefully it will help to get you started in the right direction when you launch your kite, especially if you're relatively new or if you've been struggling with launching the kite and keeping it airborne. Hopefully the information on this in the next video will help you, or at least that's my intention. Before launching a kite, there are 2 things you need to do and to prepare. One of them is the kite. You need to adjust the kite bridle. Now, on the lower leg of the kite bridle, you have attached with a lark's head knot a sliding loop that's called a toe line or a toe point loop. This moves up and down the lower bridle, and what it does is it changes the angle that the kite is when it's facing the wind. When you launch the kite, you want it to be at an angle so that when the tail of the kite is resting on the table, this is in a no-wind situation here indoors, you want the nose of the kite to be elevated about an inch, inch and a half, maybe 2 inches. So once you get that adjusted, you slide this up and down a little bit until you find that spot, and that's what you will start with as your launching angle of attack for the kite. Now, this is a trial and error process. No kite flyer, no matter how experienced, knows exactly the right location for the toe point to launch the kite and have it fly well. They have a general idea, but they first have to fly the kite and watch what the kite does. Bring the kite in and readjust the toe point location to compensate for whatever they think needs changing. So that's number 1, you have to do that. That'll get you off to a really much better opportunity to succeed when you first launch your kite. The next 2 things are related to the kite as well. Because when you're flying a North American fighter kite, you are paying attention to the nose always. The nose tells you everything you need to know about the kite as a flyer. Now, when I first started flying fighter kites, really, the wingtips, the tail, the nose, they all looked about the same when the kite was in the air. It was difficult for me to identify where the nose was. So I began painting the nose area. I used spray paint or just acrylic paint, ink, whatever I could, depending on what color my sail material was, to help me visually recognize where the nose of the kite is located, because it is the most important part of the kite to watch when you're flying. In an effort to make it even easier for me, occasionally I would add a short piece of plastic. Usually I would just cut up a strip off of a plastic bag or something and attach it as a tail to the kite. 3 or 4 feet long is all. You can be as long as you want, but it doesn't have to be very long. And what this does is two things. It makes it easier to identify where the nose is. This is the nose. And it also helps to slow down the kite's response so that your reaction time as a kite flyer doesn't have to be quite as quick in the initial stages of learning to fly. And I highly recommend using a tail if you have any challenges at all, either launching a kite or actually keeping it airborne once you do launch it. So that's what you got to do to prepare the kite. Get the nose so it's easy to recognize, maybe put a tail on, and adjust the bridle to a good point where the nose is elevated off the table when table tuning it, or just having it over something like this. So it's about 1.5 inches or so, 2 inches. It's not critical because you're going to end up changing a little bit anyway. The next thing you got to do is to prepare the flying line. The flying line that I recommend is cotton. The reason I recommend cotton is because it is the easiest material to grip. I'm using right here a braided fishing line, and it's a little slippery. And if I were using it and I was relatively a new flyer, I would have a hard time gripping it solidly enough to stop it from slipping. But cotton is different. It has a different texture, and you can buy it in different diameters. Crochet thread that is cotton is often a good one to use to start with because it's readily available at any place that sells sewing supplies. It's available in a multitude of diameters, so you just find the diameter that's comfortable for you, easy to grip, so you got a really firm grip on it. And then you need a reel. A gator style handheld fishing reel is what this is, or it's also called a Cuban handheld fishing reel. You can look it up online and find them, or I'll put a link in, and there's a place online, oneworldkites.com, that sells cotton thread or cotton flying line, and you can buy it from them either waxed or unwaxed. I have no affiliation with them. I buy from them, but otherwise I'm just a customer, that's it. But it is a good place, and they have very reasonable prices. They sell these reels. You can buy them probably on Amazon as well. They aren't very expensive, somewhere between $3 and $5 usually. They're about 6 inches in diameter. And once you get the reel and you have your line, you have to wrap the line on the reel. Once you do that, you're almost ready. The next thing is you need to attach the line to the kite, to the bridle on the kite. What I do is I fold over about an 8-inch piece of line, maybe 10 inches, doesn't really matter, and I tie a knot to form a large loop at the end of the line. And this loop is what I use to create a lark's head knot. I just go like this, and now I have a loop here at the end that I put the toe line or the toe point through, tighten it up, and I'm set. But before I do that, I usually tie a second loop at the very end of the first one. And this loop is about 1 inch long. It can be any length, but an inch is about the length that I usually use. And the purpose of this second loop has nothing to do with flying. It has to do with making it easier to disconnect the kite from the kite line. So you end up with a loop with a kind of like a tab on it. And so I make the loop, I put my toe connection through it, tighten it up, slide it up to the knot at the end of the toe, and that's how I connect my kite. It's very simple. When I release it, I simply pull on the tab on the flying line I put, that second loop, and the little tail on the bridle portion. That's it. It's very simple. Now there are flyers who prefer using swivels and snaps like are used in fishing. They use that on the end of the line instead of a loop. I've tried it. I don't find it to be beneficial at all, but there are many kite flyers who really do prefer them and use them all the time. So if that's something you want to explore, go ahead and do it, because if it worked for you, that's the important thing, having it work. So now we have the kite attached to the flying line. We have the kite bridle adjusted for its launch. We have the nose identified, the tail identified if you're using a tail. Now, equally important to the kite itself is the line and how the line is handled. The first thing is this reel has a flared or sloped side to it, and the other side is flat. This flat side we put on the ground in front of our feet, just sitting on the ground. That's it. It's about 5 or 6 inches in front of your shoes, and really what you want is for that to be located directly below where your hands are going to be when you're actually manipulating the flying line. So somewhere close to that, and the more close you get to being directly over it, the easier it is for that line to just flow off without any hesitation off of that reel, and that's what you want. You want no hesitation. Now after the line is out, let's say the kite's, you've successfully launched the kite and you're flying it, when you end up with some extra line, where does it go? You don't wrap it up on the reel. The reel's on the ground. So you just drop the line on the ground, and it accumulates on the ground. And the wind might blow it around a little bit, and it might get tangled. It will get tangled, I'll guarantee you, at some point. And don't worry about it, because that's how it is. That's just what it does. And once it's tangled, you can either just continue to fly and not let it bother you, or you can stop flying, cut the line, cut the tangle out, retie the line together, and start flying again. Pretty simple.